good Friday to you. I'm Hugh Hewitt in Studio West. So glad that you're with me for our big weekend show. As usual, we look back at the week's events. And as usual, I begin with John Ellis, founder and editor-in-chief of News Items, which is my daily must-read before the show. Good Friday to you, John, and a great weekend ahead, I hope. What did you think was most important in the news this week?
Well, I think, the Pope's passing obviously was the major story, but in terms of what we do at News Items, the big story was the shooting in Kashmir, 26 people dead, the worst terrorist event there since Mumbai in 2008, and one that is fraught with aftershocks, let's say. They're already, the Pakistani forces and the Indian forces have been shooting at one another. Pakistan is, shall we say, beholden to China. U.S. policy has tilted for a long time towards India. And so you have not just a conflict or a fight between India and Pakistan, but you also have a sort of shadow boxing behind it between China and the U.S. So it's a huge story, and one that is developing, as they say.
I want to remind everyone, both Pakistan and India are nuclear powers. They've had a long history of conflict, though it hasn't been that intense in recent years. Any idea who is behind the attack, John Ellis? Because not much news made here. I've been following it through News Items, but it didn't really strike the American news scene with much of an impact.
Yeah, the reason that people pay special attention to it is because both states, Pakistan and India, have nuclear weapons. So anything that escalates to the point that might be a consideration is something of global concern. President Obama said Pakistan was the thing that kept him up at night when he was president. The group in question calls itself the Kashmir Resistance. It's little known, but the way they distinguish between the tourists that they were going to shoot and the tourists they weren't going to shoot is whether they could recite Islamic verse. So clearly, it's an Islamic terrorist organization of some kind.
And from your reporting, I gather the area that was invaded is a peaceful tourist trap. Basically, people go there with kids and families and enjoy weekends and weeks off. So it was, if it were in the United States, it could be, Napa Valley, it could be Boca Raton, Florida. It's not a place that's used to this sort of violence. I doubt they had the security staff, did they?
No, it had been, it's a contested region, right? And so there have been tensions going back a long time. But for the last 10 years or so, maybe 15 years or so, the tensions have eased. And this region has become, as you say, maybe not a tourist trap, but a tourist destination. So the shock of this assault, if you will, this mass murder, is sort of double. It would be like having not quite like it, but having a massacre at Disneyland or something like that.
So the line of control has been in dispute forever. Is this along the line of control, or is that up in the Himalayas with China? I get
up. It's up. Yeah, the thing that's really difficult about it is that Pakistan isn't a nation so much as it is a collection of tribes. And so sorting out, which tribe did this, and Modi, the president or prime minister of India, is obviously under enormous pressure to, seek retribution, if you will. It's a very combustible situation because you're not sure who did it, number one. And number two, there's a lot of pressure on India to get whoever did it. So it's scary. And again, it's scary because the ladder of escalation right now is low. But if it escalates up to the higher rungs, then it gets really problematic.
Oh, and Pakistan has never been anybody's idea of a stable or transparent government. Let's move on to
Yeah.
the couple of elections that are coming up this weekend or soon, John Ellis, both in Canada, our neighbor to the north, and Australia, our longtime ally and participant in Five Eyes, along with Canada, the UK, and New Zealand. What do we expect from both these places?
Well, it's an interesting. Canada is particularly interesting, I think, in part because it's our northern neighbors. But you had 6 months ago, the election set up that the Conservatives were going to win back power by an overwhelming margin. They were ahead by 20 plus percentage points in the polls. The candidate Pierre, whose last name I
Polyev.
sometimes
Yeah.
Poilievre, was seen as a serious contender. He had unified the conservative wings of the party, etc. So he was in a very strong position. Trump gets nominated or gets inaugurated, and he decides that Canada should be the 51st state. And suddenly the Liberal Party jumps on as the anti-Trump party. The numbers flip, and suddenly the Liberals are ahead between 4 and 8 points. And that brings us up to the present moment. And the question is, does that 4 to 8 point lead hold, or does the election sort of drift back to where it was before Trump's, quote, intervention, end quote? We don't know the answer to that. The narrative is the liberal press and much of the Canadian press is that Trump has flipped the election and that it's on Monday, and that when the voting is all done, the Liberals will have miraculously held on to power. I'm not entirely convinced that's the case, and others who follow Canadian politics much more closely than I do are also not convinced that's the case. So Monday's a big day, and we'll see. We'll see if the liberal press narrative is correct, or if not.
How about down under? The same sort of dynamic working that the Labor Party has surged because Donald Trump got
Yeah,
elected?
yeah. I mean, because Trump has created. I mean, Trump has done wonders for liberal politicians all around the world, and the two most prominent examples, obviously, are Canada and Australia. It looked like the quote liberalish party in Australia was going to go down to defeat. Trump came on the scene. He, broke a lot of glass, and suddenly they're up by 4 or 6 points. That election is in 2 weeks, and we're not. We'll see. We need to get closer to see what the polling shows, but again, it's the same thing. The conservatives were ahead. Trump, quote, intervened, end quote, and now the liberals are ahead. And the question is whether the liberals hang on to win or whether the election goes back to where it was
All right,
pre-Trump.
lastly, John Ellis, President Trump is approaching the 100-day mark. Everyone's polling about him. Would you give us a summary of those results?
His approval rating has flipped, right? He came in with more positive than negative. It's now more negative than positive. The four polls that I follow most closely, including the Fox News poll, show Trump's approval rating somewhere between 41 and 45%. I think Fox was 45%. And the disapproval is somewhere between 52 and 55%. So that is a dramatic shift in a very short period of time. What appears to be driving it above everything else is the tariffs and what people expect will come of the tariffs, which is inflation. So they have to sort of sort out their tariff story if they're going to see any kind of rebound. If they don't, then the downward slide will probably continue.
Now, John, what do you think happens after the reconciliation passes, which I assume it's going to do by July 4th? Jason Smith told me that this week. James Langford, who's also on Senate Finance, Jason Smith on House Ways and Means, pretty optimistic they get this done. Isn't that the real test of Trump in the first 100 days? And it's not in the first 100 days. It's a massive piece of legislation. If he gets that across the line, it's a good first 6 months.
If he gets it across the line, then they can do the end zone victory dance, and make that the story of the first 6 months, as you say. The question is whether the tariffs and inflation bite prior to that. And there's a lot of sort of grim news about shipping containers and empty trucks and so on and so forth that sort of point to a difficult May. If that turns out to be true and May becomes a difficult June, then it's problematic.
Yeah, I would suggest the Republicans in House and Senate giddy up. John Ellis, you can follow him on X at Ellis Items. You can subscribe to News Items by just entering that in your Google search, John Ellis News Items. And you'll be smart every morning when you read that. Great way to begin your day. Thank you, John. I'm on special report tonight, and I think I'm on Hannity tonight. And I'm sure we're going to be talking about arresting judges. I want to begin by saying, are you open to the proposition that judges can break the law? Because if you're not keeping up. Judges break the law, I won't say frequently, but it's not really unusual. Walter Nixon was a federal judge who was convicted of bribery and had to be impeached and removed by the Senate because he wouldn't quit. But I mean, judges are just like people. There's going to be a bell curve, and most judges are going to be the mean there is going to be significantly to the right of the general population in terms of law abiding. But you're also going to get some ideological judge, and apparently Judge Hannah Dugan was one of those, and she is alleged to have helped a suspect sought by ICE to evade arrest. Pam Bondi, Attorney General Pam Bondi, went on Fox News with John Roberts and Sandra Smith today to talk about it. Cut number 6.
And to set the stage for you and Sandra, this was truly horrific. This guy was in court being prosecuted by a state prosecutor for domestic violence battery. He had beat up 2 people, a guy and a girl, hit the guy 30 times, knocked him to the ground, choked him, beat up a woman so badly they both had to go to the hospital. And John, you know, it's so rare for victims to want to cooperate. They wanted to cooperate. They were sitting in the courtroom with the state prosecutor. The judge learns that ICE was outside to get the guy because he had been deported in 2013, came back in our country, commits these crimes, charged with committing these crimes, victims in court. Judge finds out. She goes out in the hallway, screams at the immigration officers. She's furious, visibly shaken, upset, sends them off to talk to the chief judge. She comes back in the courtroom. You're not going to believe this. Takes the defendant and the defense attorney back in her chambers, takes them out a private exit and tells them to leave. While a state prosecutor and victims of domestic violence are sitting in the courtroom.
I find it hard to believe a judge would lack judgment at that level. But I also don't believe that Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, would go and detail the facts unless the facts are accurately. You know what? There's this thing called the Supremacy Clause. The federal law is supreme, especially in the area of immigration. And the judge, to the extent that she did what is alleged, is in big trouble. Cut number 8, Pam Bondi has a message for other judges. Cut number 8.
When you see these judges trying to obstruct your efforts to make this country safer, what is your message to them?
We are going to prosecute you, and we are prosecuting you. I found out about this the day it happened. We could not believe, actually, that a judge really did that. We looked into the facts in great depth. That's her picture up on the screen, Hannah Dugan, who is now in custody. You cannot obstruct a criminal case, and really, shame on her. It was a domestic violence case of all cases, and she's protecting a criminal defendant over victims of crime.
It's a very strong allegation. I'm pretty sure they wouldn't do that unless they have a very good record. We'll see what happens. Another judge, former judge, was arrested in New Mexico for allegedly harboring members of TDA, Trinidad de Aragua, and in the casita on the judge's property. When this was brought to light, he resigned from the bench, but he and his wife have been arrested. It's clear to me that the administration is sending messages to sanctuary cities and everybody else who thinks they're above the federal law. No, you are not. And Donald Trump can be made to sit in the dock on kangaroo court charges for the better part of a year in Manhattan by that less than stellar legal mind, Alvin Bragg, and whatever the judge, Juan Merchan. If that can happen, you know, I don't think you're going to find a lot of sympathy for other people who are actually breaking the law, as opposed to made-up crimes as occurred in New York. Let me remind everyone about Consumer Cellular. It is my new phone. It is easy for you to make it your new carrier as well. All you have to do is call 1-800-411-4454. Tell them Hugh sent you. You can then, they target, their target demo, 50 years and older. Why? Because a lot of you have been sold, or maybe you just used a lot of data earlier in your life, in your career. Maybe your kids maybe they're gone now. But if you're paying for unlimited data plans, you're definitely going to want to do it with Consumer Cellular because they have a great plan, 2 lines, $60 a month. But you can also go and find out whether or not one of the low gig flow plans work better for you. They're cheaper. And the key thing is don't sacrifice quality. Go and get savings without any kind of sacrifice. Make sure that you call 1-800-411-4454. 1-800-411-4454. Or go to consumercellular.com/Hugh. Pretty easy. consumercellular.com/Hugh. And you'll find the process is switching is easy. There's one menu between you and a live, real person in the United States. Just make a choice. New customer, returning customer. I want to switch. Keep your phone number, keep your data, do all that. It's so easy. The new devices come to you. consumercellular.com/Hugh. And make sure you get the data plan that is right for you. Also, don't forget, American Legislative Exchange Council. I had fun with John Williams this week, talking about his Michigan bias. But if you want to know where your state is in richstatespoorstates.org, you can either go to richstatespoorstates.org and get it straight. I think Jonathan mails them out when you send in an email, or, hey, send me my free copy of richstatespoorstates.org. And it's a nice handy, leave it in your guest room. People from out of town will say, wow, this is pretty interesting. richstatespoorstates.org. Or go www.alec.org/Hugh. ALEC, as in American Legislative Exchange Council. www.alec.org/Hugh. Get you enrolled in the State of the States newsletter. You'll find out about all the cool stuff that is happening in the laboratories of the states, not including obstruction of federal immigration law, but otherwise being innovative and very, very, very constructive in the life of the nation, our 50 states. Alec.org/Hugh. It's Friday. We are lucky Matt Continetti is in the house. He is a scholar at the American Enterprise Institute, contributing columnist with Commentary Magazine and with the Free Press, and he writes books as well. So he just never stops. Matt, there's so much to cover. I want to start first with your thoughts on the death of the Pope, which of course is the rapt attention of 1.4 billion Catholics, but I don't know if it matters much outside of that community. What do you think?
Well, I think it matters a great deal, Hugh. I mean, Catholicism, huge religion in the country and in the world. And Pope Francis is a controversial figure, not only within that faith community, but also in politics at large. I think people have eulogized him appropriately, focusing on his pastoral attitudes, his concern for the poor, his attempt to be a pope who reaches all people. But the more political aspects of his papacy also can't be ignored, especially as the College of Cardinals meets after the funeral to choose his successor.
135 cardinals, sometime between May 5 and May 11. One of the papabili, the one that intrigues me a lot, is the Patriarch of Jerusalem, Matt Continetti, Cardinal Pizzaballa. And he has been there for 20 years, and he's a man of some significant courage. After the 10/7 massacre, he offered himself up as a hostage to replace a hostage, but he's also been there for 20 years. What would that, it's my bridge to my next story about intense fighting in Gaza underway right now. What would that message send if they actually tapped the 60-year-old fella from Jerusalem?
Well, 60 years old, relatively youthful for an incoming pope. I think that would be a good sign for the church. 2, coming from outside continental Europe, especially Jerusalem, not only the holiest city in three religions, but also a just geostrategic location. Just thinking about it as you were speaking, Hugh, I immediately thought of Karol Wojtyla, Pope John Paul the Great, who, when he was elected Pope, was also useful and was also coming from Poland, coming from a country under Soviet dominion. And of course, Pope John Paul's legacy includes his advocacy of human rights, of the solidarity movement in Poland, and ultimately working with Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, bringing down the Soviet Union.
You know, Matt, it's been since 1995 that the Catholic Church has had a pope who was 75 years or younger. So it's been 30 years of old guys running the church. There is some resistance to younger popes because John Paul's pontificate was so long, John Paul II, St. John Paul II. But I really do think they're going to lose momentum, touch, if they continue to fixate on 75-year-old guys running the church. I mean, do you share that? I'm on the inside as a Catholic, hoping for energy and some unity. What do you think about youth versus age?
Well, we had an experience in American politics for 4 years of the risks of having a leader who is old and out of touch and perhaps debilitated in some fashion by age-related conditions. So no, I don't think any smart observer would want that for the Catholic Church. You know, it's an interesting point for the Catholic Church right now, Hugh, as we all know. One of the paradoxes of Francis's papacy was that he was coded or read as a progressive, but if you think about young Catholics in America today in particular, they are trending to the right. They are much more traditionalist. And of course, the growth in the Catholic Church is particularly significant in places like sub-Saharan Africa. And that church, that part of the church rather, is extremely conservative as well. So I think the cardinals need to get this right. They can't double down on the type of kind of progressivism that Francis represented, because that could risk ultimately deep fissures within the Catholic Church. I think they should look beyond Europe, and they should also look to someone who can perhaps moderate between Francis's openness, but also kind of the more doctrinal conservatism of his two predecessors, JP2 and Benedict.
It's going to be so. Eventually, stories are always slip out about how it goes. But of these 135 cardinals, a lot of them have not even met each other. I really do not know how you get to yes. 2/3 vote, by the way. It's sort of worse than the filibuster. So getting to yes, that could be a long conclave. We will see. Matt, let me ask you about the intense fighting that has broken out in Gaza, and Defense Minister Katz saying war has casualties involved. It's going to be very intense. I think that between his statement today, the reports of the fighting, and Prime Minister Netanyahu's statement on Saturday night, I believe, last week, we're in for a real battle in Gaza, sort of a Fallujah kind of thing. Do you think that?
It's certainly a possibility. The war had been in a lull for some time, Hugh, in recent weeks because of new leadership with the IDF, and also because President Trump is in office, supplying and supporting Israel in its war on Hamas. The Israel Defense Forces have upped the tempo of operations in Gaza, and that's led to increased fighting and could be more urban, dangerous warfare as these IDF troops kind of seek out and destroy the remnants of Hamas. Hamas continues to be under tremendous pressure. I would like to see more pressure being brought, especially on Egypt and Qatar, who have been sympathetic to Hamas, also Turkey, to isolate it diplomatically. But I do think here, if Prime Minister Netanyahu, the National Security Council, and the IDF leadership are in agreement, we do have the potential to deal the death blow to Hamas in the coming weeks.
Now, Matt, I'm wondering, have you read Jonathan Foreman's piece in the new issue of Commentary? I heard him on the podcast this week. I went out and immediately read the article. It's stunning, actually, how self-deceived the Israelis allowed them to become themselves to become about Hamas, its capabilities, and how it would wage war. It's really stunning how bad it is.
Yeah, this was the concepcia that
Yep.
really governed Israel's national security strategy for many years until October 7th, 2023. One thing that's striking to me about Jonathan's article, and it's of a piece of a lot of the reporting that's going on into the failures predating Hamas's invasion of Israel on that horrible day in 2023. And yet the war still isn't concluded. And Israel has challenges with Iran. So even though I think Israel's made great strides and improved its situation by fighting Hamas, really debilitating it in many ways, debilitating Hezbollah, knocking out Iran's air defense network, of course, watching as the Syrian dictator falls and then seizing the moment in taking territory to enhance the Israel defense, there's still outlying questions. And so I hope that these criticisms and reporting can help to inform the strategy, not just of Israel, but also of the United States, in order to make the world more secure and free.
Matt, President Trump sat down with Time magazine reporters, and one of them asked him, "Is Bibi Netanyahu going to drag you into a war?" Trump's response, and it's not verbatim, but it's close, is no. I won't be dragged into a war, but if we don't get a deal, I'll be leading the way. He said this is like the sixth time he has made it this stark. And I think I've come to understand the deal as meaning genuinely dismantle the centrifuges and give us your enriched uranium. Is that how you understand the deal?
At this point, there's still a lot that's in motion, and the technical teams between the United States and Iran are planning to meet this weekend, so we might know more at the end of the weekend. But I think your description is pretty accurate, Hugh. I think there's an argument within the administration about whether do we completely uproot the Iranian nuclear program as part of a deal, and the only way they get nuclear material is if it's shipped into the country, or do we allow some level of low-grade enrichment? I, of course, prefer the former option if we're going to have a deal. I don't trust the Iranians to enrich any uranium, but that's still yet to be determined. I think you hit on the key point here, which is that in the Time magazine interview, as he said in many places and many times over the past month, President Trump, his patience is not unlimited. And he is saying he would prefer to have a deal that ends the Iranian nuclear program. But if not, he is prepared to use military action to set that program back decades, if not longer.
Now, I've talked with a number of people from your podcast and other experts as well. It is not that hard to put a verification process into place. Libya did it. South Africa did it. Ukraine did it in the days of loose nukes after the collapse of the Soviet Union. You can let people have access. But the JCPOA, I want people to, they did not have access to military bases. That won't fly, Matt. Do you think that minimum standard of inspection is understood and embraced by Team Trump?
I hope it is. And I don't think that President Trump wants a repeat of the Obama nuclear deal. He ran against the Obama nuclear deal in 2016. He said again and again it was the worst deal in history, and it was. And so that's his mentality. Ultimately, Trump will decide whether the deal that's agreed to, if it is agreed to, is in our interest. And I think he would say to himself, well, we have to have inspections on the military bases, or it's not a fair deal for the United States. So there's a lot that we don't know in this process, but I think what we have to avoid here is a repeat of the experience under Obama. We have to remember, Iran's primary interest, Hugh, is in preserving the regime, preserving the world's largest sponsor of terrorism, preserving this Islamic theocracy that has done so much harm to the United States and to our allies over 40 some years.
Now,
so they might say, let's drag it out, but Trump will be prepared to call them on it.
That's what I hope. I really think he's put himself out there so many times with "there will be bombs" that it's very hard for him to hedge that rhetoric now. Before we go to the break, Matt, and talk about India and Pakistan, Yale has got an encampment. Harvard has gone to lawsuit. I think Harvard is just trying to argue that they have the right to violate the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and I don't think their lawsuit's going to work. But Yale is allowing it again, and I've seen video. It's more assault, imminent fear of an unpermitted touching, as well as obstruction of campus, and it's really quite remarkable. What do you think Yale should do, and what do you think they will do? It's not going to go away.
Yale should threaten these protesters with arrest, not through any campus judicial proceeding, but by the New Haven Police Department. And if they cancel the permits for these demonstrations and make such threats, I think that you'll see some of these encampments go away soon. That's the appropriate course of action. Do these administrations have the stomach for it? That's the question. I think one of the benefits of Trump's aggressive policy on anti-Semitism is these administrations know that if they don't have a hard line against the students, Trump is going to have a hard line against them.
And I like that he started with Harvard because they got enough money to take care of themselves. They got more lawyers than most law firms have lawyers, and they can take care of themselves. I think they're staking out an untenable position. Now, I'm all for taking their tax-exempt status. I just think they're Bob Jones with longer history. What do you think about tax-exempt status? Some people worry about slippery slope. I'm too used to slippery slopes to worry about them anymore.
Yeah, well, we've been sliding down the slippery slopes for a long time, right?
Yeah.
Look, I think it's about process. I think that's a completely legitimate question, especially given what we know about Harvard's behavior over the year, whether their failure to police their students, their failure to abide by federal law as it regards the civil rights of American citizens constitutes the deprivation of tax-exempt status for that institution. What I just want to see is we make sure that we've crossed our T's, we dot our I's, so that this can't be challenged and overturned in court.
Do you think that the Department of Justice under A.G. Bondi has crossed their T's, dotted their I's with regards to the arrests of Judge Hannah Dugan today and yesterday of former Judge Cano, both of whom are alleged to have assisted illegal immigrants in evading a legitimate ICE operation?
From what I know of the stories, I think so. I think the New Mexico case in particular is pretty incredible, and there are a lot of details about that. This latest judge out of Milwaukee, less is known immediately. But I think that this type of behavior actually isn't unsurprising when you consider some of the radical rulings that have been coming from lower court judges during the Trump administration, the nationwide injunctions just halting policy across the country because the politics of the judge are different than the politics of the elected president.
And these are state judges. I want to remind all of our
Right.
Steelers fans, there's this thing called the Supremacy Clause. Federal law wins in a showdown with state law, and state judges have to yield to federal authorities. And if they get arrested, there's no reason. Judges are not above the law. Donald Trump had to show up and go through trial in Manhattan. Matt, my first guest for most of the Big Weekend pod is usually John Ellis, who founded and edits news items, which I read every day. It's a comprehensive summary of the news. He is covering the heck out of India and Pakistan because of the terrorist attack in Kashmir that killed, I think, 28 people. And now the Indians and the Pakistanis are exchanging fire. I don't think America's even alert to this story. Do you?
No. No. Americans don't pay much attention to Indo-Pakistani relations. And unfortunately, that could come back to haunt us if a war breaks out between these two massive states, both putative U.S. allies. I mean, for a lot of the history of the two nations, America preferred Pakistan over India. But of course, in recent years, America has shifted towards supporting India. Vice President Vance just there last week. So we'll be caught in the middle if hostilities escalate from where they are now.
And I think there have been 3 India-Pakistan wars, and I believe a couple of them escalated rather quickly, as the old saying goes, and they're both nuclear states. We used to mediate these. I don't think we're mediating this one. And I don't know, maybe Steve Witkoff's on a plane to Kashmir. What do you think?
Well, but he's in Moscow. And I think then he's going to Muscat in Oman, and so yeah, just go to India or go to Jalalabad, Pakistan, and try to add that to the Witkoff portfolio. I don't know. These two powers are incredibly hostile to one another. They are both nuclear armed states. There is definitely been a problem in Kashmir and terrorism against Hindus in India, and I think America, is in a tricky position here because we have been allied with them both for so long, but of course our ties with India continue to deepen, and the U.S. Indo-Indian relationship is really going to be very important over the coming century, as both countries have an interest in containing China.
Yeah, we're tilting towards them. Matt, the piece that Jonathan Foreman, you and I referenced earlier, is about what Israel failed to believe was possible. We're just talking about India-Pakistan. A nuclear war or a nuclear exchange is actually possible between them. Do you think and hypersonic missiles makes a Pearl Harbor possible any day, any time? I don't know that American government thinks outside the box the way that Israel didn't, or whether or not you think we are pretty well prepared for all threats. What do you think?
Well, I think there are people who think outside the box. I think President Trump thinks outside the box for sure. He's at the top of our government. But the fact is, Hugh, there are so many threats right now, right? There is the threat in Iran. There's the threat in Ukraine, Russia. There's the growing threat of China and its hostile behavior just in the past week around Taiwan. And now we have another potential flashpoint in India and Pakistan. Pakistan, by the way, has been fighting with Afghanistan off and on as the Taliban and people fleeing the Taliban have caused terrorist attacks inside Pakistan. So the world is at the threshold of a global conflict. There's no question about it. So what does that mean? It means that the United States needs to be strong. It means we need to have a big defense budget. We need to be proactive against these threats, and we need to be engaged, an engagement that is, I think, more than Steve Witkoff traveling around the world. But it's a full court press in order to say that America is not going away. Yes, we'll have our hemispheric defense, but yes, we're going to try to rebalance the global trading system. But more important, our interest in keeping America safe means that we take an active role in keeping the rest of the world safe as well. I think that's a message that's important for many people to hear, and I hope we hear it in the coming weeks.
I like to think of Trump's 10% tariff as being basically a tax on the world so that America can keep the peace. It's just, to me, the cost of doing business in a secure world with freedom of navigation. He hadn't sold it that way, Matt, but I think it would be much easier to sell if we just said, no one's pulling their weight. We got to do all this. Everyone's going to chip in. Have you heard that argument made anywhere?
Yeah, I mean, the closest he makes it is, we have these troops all based all around the world. We should get something in return. And maybe the 10% tariff could be framed in such a way. There is a big contingent in the Trump administration that thinks that America should just focus on the Western Hemisphere, just focus on the southern border. And my message to them is that might work for a time. But as we can see in the world today, things are growing more dangerous. And eventually, the lesson of history is all of those problems show up on our doorstep.
Yeah, there is no abroad anymore. Hypersonic missiles, there is no abroad. Everything is within 10 minutes of everything else. Matt Continetti, thank you for joining me at length on this Friday. And I appreciate your taking time this weekend. Welcome back from your vacation. Talk to you again soon. It's Friday and the weekend. I talked to Ben Domenech, editor-at-large at The Spectator, Fox News contributor. You can follow him on X at @BDomenech. Ben, good weekend to you. Let me begin by asking, I know I just learned from Dwayne, you're Anglican. You're not Catholic. You're not part of my tribe, but you're...
One step from Rome, take or death, all that stuff.
You're Catholic adjacent. So Francis will receive proper burial this week and many reviews, but I'm already looking ahead and hoping for Pope Pizzaballa, who is the
Yes.
Jerusalem cardinal. What do you think of this whole thing? And should the Catholics get a little bit younger? They haven't had a pope under the age of 75 since 1995.
I think that they need to get younger, Hugh, and I mean, and obviously you know more about this than I do, but I certainly pay a good deal of attention to it because it's important not just for the sake of the church and the Catholic Church as the most important institution in the world, I think, but also, frankly, it has enormous results in terms of world affairs, and I think that the role of the Pope, unfortunately, over the past several years, as Pope Francis, hung on and bless his soul, and obviously we pray for him and for everyone who was affected by his passing. It's one of these things that I think has enormous import about the future, especially if you choose another person who is so long in the tooth that you can't have confidence that they're going to be around long enough to really chart a vision and a path forward. And that's something that I think is very important at this particular juncture, especially given the degree to which religious affiliation has become kind of a cultural flashpoint in a way across the Western world in particular, but certainly around the world, that it was not even a few generations ago. One that really defines what people can assume about what you believe about numerous things in the world and the way that you are going to approach things that matter, not just as a political matter, but the priorities that you have in life and priorities you particularly place on the importance of family, which I think is a defining subject for our moment.
Oh, and boy, did it come home this week in the United States in the case before the United States Supreme Court that pitted Montgomery County, Maryland educrats against parents across the religious spectrum, Muslims, Catholics, Jews. I really like to mention the Ethiopian Copts, COPTS, since nobody ever heard of them before unless they actually are a student of religion. None of them want their kids to be exposed to this curriculum. And it looks like the Montgomery County ideologues just said, you will be made to obey. I can't believe it.
I'm curious which of the things stuck out to you the most in terms of the arguments that were coming from the Montgomery County side. But one in particular that I found to be obnoxious was this idea that the problem with administering these different books to these very, very young kids, I mean, younger even than my eldest, was that too many people were opting out. And so it made things too difficult to administer. And that to me was just like, well, if that's the problem, maybe you should be reconsidering your approach. But no, they believe that they know best. And look, I don't know if you had a chance to read this report about this speech that Alyssa Slotkin was giving today, where she was going to call on Democrats to essentially, they need to stop being the party of woke, that they need to be a party that is stronger. She actually compares it to, she says that she wants the party to be more along the lines of Detroit Lions head coach Dan Campbell in its attitude and take back the flag and all these other things. Well, that's a nice, fancy, sort of approach to these things. It's one that is awfully inventive in the sense that it's only been recommended by every smart Democrat for the last 20 years.
Yeah, I did not see her amicus brief in this case.
No, exactly. Unfortunately, she's dealing with people like the Montgomery County folks as being a significant portion of her own party. Yeah. And as long as that's the case, that's going to be a very significant defect for Democrats in terms of trying to make their case not just to Americans commonly, but particularly to religious Americans and to ethnic communities across the country who prioritize such things in their lives in a way that their establishment elite white wine mom set does not.
Well, Ben, let me ask you to try and I've been trying to think this through. Justice Gorsuch eviscerated Mr. Schoenfeld, and I had so badly that I went and looked up to see if he'd ever argued before the court before. Yeah, but he's a corporate guy. And it's been complex litigation issues. This is a cultural hotspot, and it's about parental rights, which are deeply rooted in American fundamental liberties, going back to the 20s in a couple of cases known as Meyer and Pierce. And as most recently as Wisconsin v. Yoder, his uphill battle. Yeah. I don't think he was prepared at all, and boy, did he get scissored by Kavanaugh and Gorsuch. Did it come through how badly it went for him to a layman?
It certainly did. I think in terms of the DC legal community, because I had multiple people who are friends of mine reaching out to me, saying, "Hey, you need to make sure you don't miss this."
Yeah,
and that is always an indication that this stands out amidst the frame of everything that people normally talk about. Look, there's so much of a pivot on this, I think, though, within the intellectual cohort of the Democrats who want to win, and I would include in that number Rahm Emanuel, who, by the way, got got reamed out by a couple of female podcasters recently on some of these subjects. But it's one of these things where there are certain Democrats who understand we have to break away from this craziness in order to win. In order to get back to being a party that could contend for the majority, of the country. And it's not just, John Fetterman making comments about tunnel rats, which, by the way, was my favorite quote of the week. but it's also one of these things where you have to understand that is so much of a portion of your party now. It's no longer just the rump. It's no longer just some extreme wing that you can, that you can dismiss. It's the same as sort of looking at the Bernie Sanders AOC phenomenon. There are too many of them. They outnumber you. And that's a real problem for their coalition going forward. Now, I don't know how they solve it, but I do know this. The only thing that is giving them hope going into this midterm currently is that Donald Trump is making a botch of the economic success that he had his first go-round. And they are hoping that this tariff agenda and everything coming out of it leads to Republican defeat in the midterms because they were not able to deliver on the type of golden age that was promised for so many people who believed that was going to come in a second Trump term.
Well, now, I talked to both Jason Smith, chairman of the House Ways and Means this week, and Senator Lankford, who's on finance in the Senate. Jason Smith, a little more optimistic than Lankford in thinking that July 4th, the reconciliation will be on the president's desk. Senator Lankford saying he'd be happy if they got anything done by August. But they got to get it done, Ben, because that is the unlocking. You really can't expect people to invest unless the tax code is in place.
No, you're completely correct. And look, we've been saying this, I think, for the past couple of months. That this is so critical to the president's agenda going forward. And I will tell you one thing that I have heard, in this past week, which I had not really clocked before from the people who I talk to who are both in the White House and adjacent to the White House. There is very much a mindset in this White House that did not necessarily exist in the first Trump term about these coming midterms, where they believe that they have to do everything possible that they can in order to hold both houses of Congress to a much greater degree. They understand the importance of it to a much greater degree, and they understand it in really, we won't be able to get anything done. It's an existential thing for them in a way that I believe is both true and, frankly, it's gratifying that they understand the degree to which their agenda will just come to a full stop if they lose the House. And that's something that I think they didn't really fully understand the first time around. Trump 1.0 did not understand that, especially perhaps motivated by the animosity between him and Paul Ryan, which was totally unnecessary. But it's one of these things where I do believe that they think that these priorities as being something that it's not just about the agenda, it's about whether we are going through another impeachment a year
or two or three. I really do think it'll be an impeachment conveyor belt.
And they understand that now to a degree that I don't think they did before.
Well, that will be a great thing if it manifests itself in a little bit more care.
You know what another great thing is, Hugh? A great thing is what the Cleveland Browns pulled off last night.
I was afraid you bring up Mason Graham, and the fact of the matter is,
I think that's a great pick. I think you pulled off something. I think the Cleveland Browns pulled off something that could be a franchise-changing event.
Talk to me in 3 hours after Jalen Milroe and Trevayon Henderson are.
The next two picks could be the difference.
That's it.
This could be a turning point. You could view this as big of a turning point in the history of this franchise as you have had in a very long time.
Well,
And thank that 34-year-old GM down in Duval for
giving us a
this
first
kind of
round.
thing.
And by the way, I hate to root against the team, but Jaguars, if you go 0-6 at 18 next year, it's fine by me. We started the draft. Let's go with the draft. I love the draft, Ben. I don't know if you love the draft. I love the draft.
I love the draft in part because I've had a team that sucked for so long in Washington that it was always a big deal. It's a very real rarity for me to not make it a big deal. And but I love the fact that this has become, an iconic American event where you have so many people. You triple the size of the population of Green Bay shows up.
Yeah, it's what you're too young to remember the joy of victory, the agony of defeat. Worldwide Sports, ABC's weekend thing. But that's why I love it in condensed. It was awful for Shedeur Sanders yesterday. Just awful to fall out of the first round. But all these other people are getting picked, and their joys and their hopes and their ambitions and all those years and years of football practice coming through, moms, dads, uncles, aunts, agents, they're all celebrating. That's why I think it's like king for a day.
I love the cut to the shot of the home,
yes.
Family gathered together, their custom T-shirts made, the baby girl next to them throwing up, and that kind of thing. It's wonderful. But it's also, this is one of those things where the hopes and dreams come together. It's such an American event, and the fact that it's become an event is I think a very good thing. It's something that gives people something to aspire for, but also I think it just speaks to the universal nature of the NFL within the American experience. It's the one thing it's just so much more dominant than anything else as a TV constant. But look, you learn about these kids and you learn about their stories. You learn about where they came from. You learn about the people who go from being 0-star recruits to being first rounders, and it's just an inspirational event, and I like the fact that it's become something that is so etched in America's mind as part of this seasonal round that we go through with sports. And look, I'm serious. I think the Cleveland Browns pulled off something that might be maybe not quite the level, but it's going to be. I think it could be the Ricky Williams trade.
I hope you're right. By the way, did you like the Commanders' picks? They went to protect Jaden, right?
The kid from Oregon he's a very long, athletic guy who Oregon runs lots of screens and lots of wide receiver things that you have to get downfield quick. And Cliff Kingsbury, the ex Arizona Cardinals head coach, who's our offensive genius, put a note on the GM's desk this yesterday morning, insisting you must draft this kid, and so I'm glad with the outcome when he's glad.
Yeah, and I got to say, if you've got an asset like Jaden, you want to put some offensive.
You got to protect him. You got to do it, and they've experienced the other side of that with Robert Griffin, and they. Oh,
I forgot that RG3 got crushed like Tim Couch. I've got my Tim Couch bobblehead doll that Dwayne broke, unfortunately, but the Browns broke him by not having a line when they drafted him. Ben, today on Friday, the Trump administration caused to have arrested Judge Duncan. Is that her name? Hannah.
Is it Durgan?
Dugan. Hannah Dugan. Yeah. And the day before they arrested Joel Cano, who used to be a judge, but he quit when he realized the law was coming. Boy, talk about messages that are going to be well received. The supremacy clause still works. What do you think about this?
Well, I mean, I haven't tuned into MSNBC today, Hugh, but I can imagine what the reaction is going to be. But look, this is actually, at least according to the reports in question, which I've read, and it seems completely justified. This was a situation where a judge was actively working to help someone who was going to be arrested avoid the law, and this is something that is absolutely unacceptable. You don't get to do that just because you are a judge, and I think the reaction to it will be over the top and will suggest that we are living in some kind of
it's Orban time,
and Larry David can add it to his next op-ed about dining with Hitler, but that to me is something that indicates that this administration's not going to play around with people who violate the law while also pretending to be its greatest defenders.
So messaging. Today, the president sat down with Time magazine, and they asked him, is Bibi going to drag you into a war? Or is Netanyahu going to drag you into a war? He said, no, I'm not going to be dragged into a war. I'm going to be leading it unless we have a deal. And this is like the 7th time he said, you do it my way or we bomb you, Ben. I believe him, but a whole bunch of people don't want to.
Hugh, you and I feel like sometimes that we're the only people listening to him when he actually says this.
Yeah.
Because the way that the conversation works around this, you'd think that like he's not explicitly saying what he's going to do, which he's doing over and over and over again. And look, in the context of this, I have to say, this week was interesting to me. I wrote multiple times about the situation of the Pentagon and the fallout from the different, factional issues regarding Pete Hegseth's staff. But I do think there is a significant overlap going on right now between these different factions that have different approaches, very different approaches to the Iran question. And I think Witkoff and the folks who are aligned with his view, are quite frankly, working at odds with what the president is currently saying. Like the president wants, to avoid a war here, but if it's inevitable, he does want to be leading. He doesn't want to be calling, he doesn't want to be in a situation where, he's accused of being dragged into something or doing something unwillingly. And I don't think he will be. I think that he knows and is very clear-eyed about this issue and has been for quite a long time, and people haven't been paying attention to what he's been saying.
And the chain of command is Trump, Hegseth, Kurilla. That's it. Yep. Everybody else is a bystander. If the president tells Pete Hegseth, hit the nuclear sites, what do you got, a dozen and 2 dozen of them hit them with the stealth, let the Israelis go first, take out the remaining.
The chain of command is this chain I beat you with until you realize I'm in command.
That's it. That's it. And it's sort of like the chain of command for the judges.
Yes.
There's a supremacy clause. They don't get to do federal immigration law. That's not their job.
And this is something that I think, look, they were playing fast and loose with this in Trump 1.0, and I think that there were a lot of people around the president at the time who simply didn't recognize that there were opportunities for him to push back against this. This time around, I think he has people who do recognize it and came in prepared for this eventuality and, in fact, are not surprised. This is the one aspect, by the way, of this lawfare that I think people are missing out. This is something they anticipated. It's why they've teed up so many of these things early on, because they anticipated these fights and they want to actually win them. Now, I think that they're going to be wrong about some of them, including the birthright citizenship thing, as we've discussed before.
Yep.
But that's something where they wanted to tee up the question right off the bat, as opposed to wait over the course of years and then maybe be leaving office by the time that...
Which is why, by the way, I think that's why the Trump administration is going to prevail over Harvard. And I think Harvard made an idiot's move by preemptively suing, citing the First Amendment. It's the Bob Jones case again, 1983 Bob Jones case. They hate the precedent. It's foursquare on there. If what Harvard was doing, they were doing not to Asian Americans and Jews, they were doing to blacks, it would be exactly the same.
Yep.
And
exactly.
I have no patience for them. But I want to ask you about Yale. How long does Yale let this go on? Because this encampment, we're back to the future again on the campus of Old Eli.
Yeah, I think it's unfortunate, and I think that my own hope is that the experience of the last couple of years factors into what they do next, because they can't let this continue. I mean, it's not. You cannot have an institution of higher learning that allows this type of thing to continue. Otherwise, you end up with, they're very expensive inmates, but you can't let them run the asylum. So it's a look. Going after higher ed, I think, by the way, is one of the most important things that this administration is doing already. I'm going to be doing a piece for the next issue, in fact, of The Spectator, profiling Chris Rufo, who's obviously a Bradley Foundation winner this year. I think he's one of the most important people in the conservative intellectual space right now, because he's guiding policy and he's guiding tactics at the same time, which is something that you rarely see overlap. And I think he's a pretty unique individual in that case. This is really important, and it's important in the sense that it goes beyond whatever the next 3 years brings. It goes to the question of, when my 4-year-old is looking at institutions of higher learning, will this be one that is even acceptable for her to go to, or is the Ivy League off the map?
And I am willing to have that fight now. I want to close by asking, have you written anything about India and Pakistan? Because two nuclear powers that have had 3 wars in the past, we don't have much pull with Pakistan. I'm not sure India will listen to us on this either, but it's heating up.
I think it is very real and very heating up, and I've been paying attention to it for a long time. I did essentially the biggest thing that I did in college about the Musharraf regime. The thing that I think is really important for people to pay attention to here is we do not have as much power after the last couple of years in terms of our relationship with India as we would like to have. I think we have, especially I think, unfortunately, a weakened relationship with them as it relates to this. And so because of that, Modi's going to do what he's going to do, and we're going to have to work around him, I think, in ways to try to prevent this from exploding into something much bigger, which it very well could be given the tensions involved.
You know, there's an article in commentary about how the Israelis were wholly absorbed in their own preconceived ideas about what was possible, not possible out of Gaza. I don't think America is really awake to what's possible, not possible along the Pakistan-India border. I just don't think we are.
We are. I think you're completely correct about that. We are not aware of this, and we needed to be talking about it, frankly, in much earlier than this crisis. And the fact that people are only coming up to speed with it now is unfortunate, because it should have been part of a political conversation.
Yeah. Next week, Ben and I will do AQ Con. We'll give the Steelers fans a lesson. In the meantime, Jason Milroe and then Henderson, and I'll be a happy man by the time we get to the third round, Ben Domenech.
We'll see. I'm saying there's a gleam, man. There's a gleam.
A little bit of hope. A little bit of hope goes a long way in Cleveland. Thank you, Ben Domenech. Let me do the market update. Brought to you every day by our friends at AmericanFederal.com. Great sponsors. Nick Grovich and his team are expert in the buying and selling of gold, silver, and other precious metals. They'll sell you gold, and the more you buy, the less your commission is. They'll buy your gold, and ditto with silver and platinum and everything else. They are also experts on collectibles. I don't do that. I just buy ounces and put them away. Other people with a lot more money buy bullion and put it away. If you're going to do either of those things, or you're going to sell gold because you're up against the wall, do it with Nick and his team. 1-800-221-7694. 1-800-221-7694. The week ended like it's been for the last 3 days with the Dow, the S&P, and the NASDAQ up. Now, the Dow barely went up. It went up 0.05%. S&P went up 0.75%. NASDAQ went up 1.25%. So it was a good week for stocks overall. Gold dropped a little bit to $3,318 an ounce. It's been everywhere this week from $3,500 to $3,200. I don't know, and I don't predict, and I'm not a prophet. I only tell you the fact that over the past 100 years, gold more than kept pace with inflation. And it is not subject to the wild ride that stocks are. Now, I believe in diversification, own some precious metals, own some dirt, own some stocks, own some bonds, have some cash. It's not exactly rocket science, and you shouldn't try and make it rocket science unless you're really, 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 really good at this. It is not a game for amateurs, not a game for inside traders. That's illegal. It's sound investment advice. Get a financial advisor to find out. But if they want you to do some gold, do it with Nick Grovich and his team at AmericanFederal.com. Let me also remind everyone, Dennis Prager is going to come back. We're looking forward to a June return. Until then, I play a little bit of Dennis every day and remind you can join Pragertopia immediately. Here's a little bit of Dennis for today.
Hello, Dennis. I tell you what, talk about crossing something off my bucket list. I really want to know if there was a campaign to draft you, would you just kind of would it be okay to just see what happens, see if there's any kind of momentum that comes up behind that?
Yeah, if somebody wants to make that effort, I won't stop them.
I do not want Dennis drafted for anything except a return to the broadcast world soon. But if you are missing your Dennis fix, go to Pragertopia and join. Donald Trump on the White House lawn, cut number 1.
We're leaving and going to Rome, where we'll be attending the funeral of Pope Francis. Some of you are going to go. Anybody going? And it's going to be very interesting. We're going to meet with a lot of the foreign leaders. They want to meet. Trade deals are going very well. I think Russia and Ukraine, I think they're coming along, we hope. It's very fragile. And Iran, I think, is going very well. We'll see what happens. We're working on plenty of things. that shouldn't be worked on, because none of this stuff should have happened. This should have been taken place by Biden. It should have been fixed by Biden, but he couldn't do it, nor could he come close to doing. So anyway, we're going to Rome to pay our respects, and we'll be leaving that same day. We'll be coming back home tomorrow night, and I'll see some of you over there. Otherwise, I'll see you on television.
Okay, and then he went on to say about trade negotiations with General Secretary Xi of the Chinese Communist Party, cut number 2.
You said you spoke with President Xi. Have you spoken to him since the tariffs? When did you last
I don't want to comment on that, but I've spoken to him many times.
And then, cut number 3.
From Japan, I'm getting along very well with Japan. We're very close to a deal.
They just sent George Glass, great ambassador to Japan. Great ambassador. I'm a little obsessed with the draft. I'm a Browns fan. For many years, that's all we had was draft day hopes. And then we became good. And the Baker Mayfield years could have been great, but he got hurt. And that's a long story. And then the Deshaun Watson disaster is a long story. But tonight, the Browns are on the clock. Right? So the Browns made a big trade last night with the youngster who's running the Jacksonville Jaguars. They gave up the second pick in the draft in exchange for the 5th pick of the draft and a first rounder next year and an extra second rounder this year and a swap of picks in the 4th and a 5th rounder. I don't know when. It was a haul, and Andrew Berry is not easily fooled. So we have to wait and see. It's sort of like you can't judge a draft, just like you can't judge President Trump for about a year and a half or 2 years. Then you get to make a judgment on some evidence. But I was not looking for a defensive lineman last night when they started the draft, and much less a guy from the team up north. But Mason Graham was ranked higher than he went on many boards, had him at number 4, and he went at number 5. Okay, great. Now the Browns have got, I'm just breaking this down for the Steelers fans who don't understand football. The Browns have needs everywhere, but they got to go oh. They had 4 picks tonight. So I'm hoping for Milroe at 33, Henderson, Judkin at 36. Then go find me the best tight end on your board and your best interior offensive lineman, because we got great guards and great center, and they're getting a little bit old. And so Conklin's out there. You might be able to find a left tackle too, or a swing tackle. I don't know. I'm counting on the mountain man coming back, and we'll see if his arthroscopic knee surgery went well. It probably did. And we should be in great shape. But I love the draft, and Friday night's fun because they speed it up a little bit, and it's not endless talking about the same people. Now you get to actually see some people you haven't heard of before and dig in. But who knows? Andrew Berry, I've been checking my text. He's catching phone calls from all over. People want to move up to number 33. You love to have the 33 pick. All night long, people know that you have a pick that they can use, so they decide what they could possibly give you. And Andrew Berry just sits there and says, see and raise, see and raise, see and raise. And he said, boy, there are a lot of people that want this pick. It's a good situation to have something that everybody wants to buy from you and they're willing to spend for. And don't take players, take other draft choices, because we still have a cap problem from the Watson fiasco. But they're digging out. And whether or not the young man, I say young man, he's 34. He was with the Rams for a few years. Their new GM in Jacksonville. Whether or not he made a boneheaded move, I have no idea. We won't know until next year. But having 2 first rounders next year means you go hunt for a quarterback next year and go through the year with Kenny Pickett and Joe Flacco. But for years and years and years, this happened with Julio Jones when the Browns passed on him and the Atlanta Falcons. We traded down with the Falcons, and he played 7 Pro Bowls. He's probably Hall of Fame. Every time I saw him make a catch, I said, that would look good. We haven't had a receiver like that since Paul Warfield, actually. And so there was another receiver there last night in Travis Hunter. Generational player, all the good accolades, and they trade him. It's like a recurring dream. It's Groundhog Day in Cleveland. Now maybe this time it'll work. Never know. Do not let your heart grow weary. If you can be a Browns fan, you can endure life. If you're a Browns fan, you can endure life. I want to go back to what I'm going to be talking about, I imagine, on Special Report and Hannity tonight, the arrest of the judges. And I want you to hear Pam Bondi. Let's start with cut number, it's the Attorney General on with John Roberts and Sandra Smith. Cut number 7.
I mean, when you look at the associations with this violent Venezuelan gang, Tren de Aragua, and this person that they harbored in their home, he was showing signs through clothing, we were told, tattoos. There was evidence through voice messages and text messages of his association to TDA. So what charges will Cano and his wife face, if any?
So Judge Cano, soon to be former Judge Cano, got his charges were just unsealed. He's charged with obstruction. He admitted post Miranda. He took one of the TDA members' cell phones himself, took it, beat it with a hammer, destroyed it, and then walked the pieces to a city dumpster to dispose of it to protect him. The wife also is charged with destroying evidence. Sandra, not only that, this TDA member, and he had on a necklace that said kill, something about death. He had tattoos all over him. He also had on his cell phone pictures of 2 decapitated victims, decapitated, gruesome photos, and he was sending them out, and whoever he was sending them to was sending back saying, hey, you need to be careful. You shouldn't be sending these. You shouldn't be texting these photos out. Not only that, these 2, the judge and his wife, gave him assault rifles that belonged to their daughter. That's what they're charged with. In the criminal report affidavit, he goes to a shooting range with these assault rifles, with a suppressor, with other known TDA members, and they're shooting. This is the last person that we want in our country, nor will we ever tolerate a judge or anyone else harboring them.
And then there's the next judge. This is Judge Huggin, cut number 6, the Wisconsin judge. And we're talking Dugan, Judge Dugan. Can we play
and to
that,
set
please?
the stage for Hugh and Sandra, this was truly horrific. This guy was in court being prosecuted by a state prosecutor for domestic violence battery. He had beat up 2 people, a guy and a girl, hit the guy 30 times, knocked him to the ground, choked him, beat up a woman so badly they both had to go to the hospital. And John, you know, it's so rare for victims to want to cooperate. They wanted to cooperate. They were sitting in the courtroom with the state prosecutor. The judge learns that ICE was outside to get the guy because he had been deported in 2013, came back in our country, commits these crimes, charged with committing these crimes, victims in court. Judge finds out. She goes out in the hallway, screams at the immigration officers. She's furious, visibly shaken, upset, sends them off to talk to the chief judge. She comes back in the courtroom, you're not going to believe this, takes the defendant and the defense attorney back in her chambers, takes them out a private exit and tells them to leave. While a state prosecutor and victims of domestic violence are sitting in the courtroom.
Yeah, you got to admit, that sounds pretty bad. Judge Dugan in trouble, former Judge Cano in trouble, and the Trump administration is not messing around. Do not obstruct the work of ICE. It's Friday. That means time for Tarzana Joe, the poet laureate of the Hugh Hewitt Show. Hello, Joe.
Hello, Hugh. I wrote this poem before today's legal follies, but the theme fits, I think. I know some folks who love the law, and really I don't mind it, because they are enamored of the law the way they find it. For them, it's a profession, not a job or hobby, and they can quote you statutes from the Code of Hammurabi. Of skilled interpretation, they are devoted students, respectful to the legacy of careful jurisprudence.
Oh, Joe. Oh, Joe, the Tarzana wireless failed us, Joe.
For those who treat the law the way they want laws to be, just who find powers, rights that they next among the one.
It's a terrible thing, Joe. The Tarzana wireless has failed you for the first time in many a year. And after you had used the word Hammurabi in a poem. Are you back now?
Yes, I got to Hammurabi in the
Yes.
You want to try from Hammurabi on?
Yeah.
We'll go. Okay, of skilled interpretation, they are devoted students respectful to the legacy of careful jurisprudence. But our system has a problem, and one that's plain to see. From those who treat the law the way they want the laws to be. Judges who find powers or rights that they've created, where nowhere in the canon are these rights enumerated. Next among the wanting, and here there's no dispute, are prosecutors who decide what they will prosecute. Block a major highway? That's just inconvenient. Everyone can rest assured the DA would be lenient. Prison for defacing cars? That would be enslavement, but shackles for the guy who hits the brakes on rainbow pavement. Dismantle all the prisons, disconnect the chair. All we want's a system we can all agree is fair. That's I Love the Law by Tarzana Joe.
Well, Joe, you got it in despite the interruption in service from Tarzana. I want to encourage everyone to read it uninterrupted. Go to Tarzana Joe at Reagan. No, that's where you go to write him. TarzanaJoe.com has the poem. If you need a poem, you write him at TarzanaJoe at Reagan.com. TarzanaJoe at Reagan.com. Business good, Joe?
Absolutely the best ever.
That's because it's the golden age, Joe.
Yes, the golden age of poetry.
The golden age of poetry and in America. Tarzana Joe, always a pleasure. That will be posted over at TarzanaJoe.com immediately. And I love the fact you got Hammurabi in there. That's the first time Hammurabi's made an appearance in 23 years. So I'm glad to have him.
Look what it did to our connection. Yeah.
I know. You broke the internet. Hammurabi, not him again. They probably think it's something from Ghostbusters. Thank you, Joe. Don't go anywhere, America. Dr. Larry Arnn and the Hillsdale Dialogue, straight ahead. Winston Churchill's My Early Life. We're back into the book. And I'll see you also on Special Report. If you're tuning out right now, I'll be on Special Report tonight. And I think Hannity as well.